Legendary Pokemon are easily one of the most appealing parts of the entire franchise. The cover art for almost every mainline Pokemon game features some kind of legendary or mythical Pokemon that is meant to pull you into playing the game to one day catch said Pokemon. These legendary Pokemon can range from literal god of the universe to whatever the heck this thing is. And if it weren't already obvious, not all of these legendaries were created equal. So we created a list of every legendary and mythical Pokemon and ranked them from Z tier being the absolute most iconic and best designed legendaries to F tier being the absolute trash and forgettable legendaries. Be sure to comment down below which legendary Pokemon is your favorite, and now let's get into it. Alright, starting off we have Articuno, one of the three legendary birds from the Kanto region. Of course you have Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, but Articuno itself I've always really liked out of the three legendary birds. It's probably my favorite out of all of them. I feel like the design is very simple, but I think, you know, the designs being simple in Pokemon is something you kind of want to stick to, and it's something that, you know, later generations start getting away from as time goes on. Articuno for me, I don't quite think it's like Z tier iconic, but I would say Articuno as far as design goes would deserve to be up in S. Starting off simple, I mean, I think that's not a hot take. Galarian Articuno though, I think probably would go a tier down. I do still like its design, but I don't know, it feels a little too much for me, and I also don't really love redoing Articuno's original design. TBH, I feel like Articuno was good already. You didn't need to go back and like fix it or redo it. I understand it's a different variant for a different region, but I don't know, it's okay. Zapdos. Zapdos as well is a pretty iconic Pokemon. It's, you know, one of the big three in the trio. I think it deserves to be up in S tier as well. Galarian Zapdos just looks like a big chicken, and Zapdos also looks like a big chicken too, but it gets away with it because usually its design is not it perched on the ground. But I think Zapdos in the Galar form, I think it's probably the weakest Galarian bird out of the three, and I would put it into B tier if I'm being real with you. Moltres. Moltres, to me personally, is the weakest design out of all three of the birds. I don't know what it is, I just think like the fire bird just... I like it still, but I do think it's like a little bit below Articuno and Zapdos, you know? I don't know what it is exactly that does it for me, but I would put Moltres into A tier, but high A tier as far as design goes. However, Galarian Moltres is the strongest out of the three Galarian birds, which is funny because it's the exact opposite of original Moltres. I would put Galarian Moltres into S tier. I don't love the idea of rehashing the thing that we've already seen before, but I do think Moltres in Galarian form it's pretty sauced. I like the black and pink. It just goes really well together. Mewtwo. Okay, Mewtwo, you already know. I'm not gonna bait. I'm not gonna, you know, put it somewhere controversial. I'm not gonna throw it into F tier just for shits and giggles, but I will put Mewtwo into Z tier, of course. It is like the titular legendary Pokemon. I think the thumbnail, when I made this tier list, I put Mewtwo on the thumbnail because it's just the iconic legendary Pokemon. That and Mew. But of course, I mean, we can, you know what? We can just put Mew up there already. You know what I mean? I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but we can put Mew up into Z tier as well. You already know. Mew is like the ancestor Pokemon. It was like one of the first, if not the first Pokemon, like after Arceus and, you know, all of the other creation Pokemon, the ancestor to most of the species that we see. It's of course iconic, and the thing about Mewtwo and Mew is like their entire backstory, especially in the Pokemon First movie. There's like an extended cut that gives the entirety of Mewtwo's backstory, and I'm not going to expand on this, but if you look into it, Shadow the Hedgehog stole the backstory to Mewtwo. Mega Mewtwo X. I don't like this one very much. I think it's still cool as far as design goes, but I really do think they should have only made it to where it was Mega Y Mewtwo instead of doing the X form. The Mega Y version looks fantastic. The Mega X Mewtwo, I would actually go as far as to say this design doesn't feel very inspired, and I would put it into C tier. Dare I say? It looks like he's wearing like flotation devices, you know what I mean? Like it's Mewtwo's day at the pool and he's got like little floaties on. It also just kind of looks like it's fan-made, but I think this one in particular just kind of looks like it's like, ooh, what if we tacked on a couple extra details onto Mewtwo? It doesn't really feel cohesive to me. Whereas Mega Mewtwo Y, I like a lot because it feels original, and on top of that, it really does kind of coincide with actual Mew. I like the way that it almost goes into into a Mew-esque form while still being Mewtwo. I can't quite put it into Z tier, but I would put it into S for it being at least a little inspired and it feeling like it works between Mewtwo and Mew. When I first saw this design, I thought it was Mew 3. I'm sure some of you guys have heard about Mew 3 or like know about like that myth that's been out there for years. And I thought that's what this was when I was first growing up and when I heard about Mega Mewtwo Y, because I didn't really know what Mega Evolutions were when I was growing up until, you know, later on. But yeah, that's what I thought it was at first. Shadow Mewtwo. I don't really love Shadow Mewtwo. Usually when a Pokemon has a darker variation, I'll usually like it, but I don't know what it is with this one. I just don't really love it. I'd put Shadow Mewtwo into probably B tier. I think if it were rendered differently, I'd like it a little bit more, but in this picture in particular, I just don't think it looks right. Mega X Shadow Mewtwo. Again, I don't love Mega X Mewtwo. I would put this into C tier right next to the other version of it. Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. I love this trio so much. Dare I say, might very well be the best one we ever see in all of Pokemon. I think there's a compelling argument to be made about Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres, but for me, I think the legendary dogs really do something special for me. I don't know what it is, but I would put Raikou into probably A tier. I would put Entei into S, and I would actually put Suicune into Z tier. I think Suicune is a fantastic design, and I think that it deserves to be up in Z tier for sure. Lugia. I'm not gonna lie to you. Lugia is 100% my favorite legendary throughout the entirety of the Pokemon franchise. It is such a good design. The Pokemon 2000 movie is fantastic. Just all context with Lugia, the battle theme, Soul Silver, like it's just so good. And I would put Lugia confidently into Z tier. It is a fantastic design. Shadow Lugia. I think Shadow Lugia is cool, but I think the overly dark colors and like the edginess of it kind of take away from the mystique that is Lugia. Like, I think Lugia really works as like this pure essence type being, and then like the Shadow Lugia still takes that same design, but it doesn't quite work as well as like the pure white Lugia. I would say Shadow Lugia definitely deserves to go into like S tier, but not quite up there in Z. Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is the first legendary Pokemon that you see in the Pokemon anime. Ash looks up after the end of the first episode, and he sees Ho-Oh, like, ascending into the clouds. And when I was a kid, I actually thought Ho-Oh was a pharaoh when I first watched that episode, but it turns out that it's a Ho-Oh. I gotta be real. I love this Pokemon. I think it's iconic. I think the Gen 1 and Gen 2 legendaries really hit the nail on the head with, like, not bloating their roster, but it also is, like, it also comes with the time. Like, they maybe were trying to save on memory or whatever, but I think they did a really good job of like making sure that their legendaries felt like legendaries and not really bloating their roster with what all they threw at you. Legendary Pokemon during this era in particular really did feel like they were something special that you could only get one time and that you would never get them again, and you kind of start losing that with Gen 3 and beyond, but we'll get to that. Celebi. I think Celebi is a great designed Pokemon. Like, you have all of these big mythical beings on this list so far, and then you have your really docile and small ones in the form of like Mew and Celebi, and I think that having that contrast of like a mythical Pokemon kind of being something small and not like this extra large powerhouse Pokemon, they do a really good job in conveying that, and I like that. It gives it a little more variation instead of it being like every single legendary has to be like this huge awesome power. I think it's cool that there's like a subdued element to that, and Celebi feels like a mythical Pokemon. Like, it just has that vibe to it. I would put Celebi up into Z tier as well. Regirock, Regice, and Registeel. I think the Regis are really interesting because on the path to getting them, you had to like learn Braille, you had to look at the handbook for the actual game, you had to like do a bunch of research to actually get these Pokemon, and it made them feel like true mythical Pokemon instead of the game like kind of hand-holding you to getting them. So I have to give some credit to them for that, but as far as their designs go, I think Regirock kind of falls behind when compared to Regice and Registeel. I would put Regirock into like B tier, I would put Regice into S, and I would put Registeel up into A tier. Regice is easily the best looking design out of all three of the original Regis that we see in Gen 3. Latias and Latios. I like these Pokemon a lot, but it almost feels like they're afterthoughts a lot of the time when it comes to Gen 3. I don't really feel like they're that important, and I think that it kind of comes with their design as well. Like, they're red and blue, and that's great, but I don't think I could put them any higher than A tier, and that's, I think, where they deserve to go. Mega Latias and Mega Latios. These designs are some poo-poo. Dare I say, I know some people might get mad at me for saying that, but these are some real stinker designs, especially because they both turn purple and they both look exactly the same. They also just kind of turn into like these like jet plane looking things, and I don't really like that. Like their original forms kind of look like that already, right? But I think they really kind of doubled down into that, and for the worst. I would say these go into like C tier. There's a better way to convey Mega Latias and Mega Latios that doesn't feel as lazy as this does. If you're gonna do one for a legendary Pokemon, like go all out, you know? This kind of feels like you got one foot in the door. You didn't really commit to the idea of giving them a true Mega evolution. Kyogre and Groudon. Both Kyogre and Groudon have pretty good designs, but I do think that Kyogre is a little bit less cool than Groudon. But that's just my own opinion. I think both of these deserve to go up into S and like, you know, midway into S tier, but I do think Groudon does clear Kyogre just a little tiny bit as far as design goes. Obviously, Kyogre beats Groudon because ground type is weak to water, but like that's neither here nor there. That's not what we're talking about, right? So I think Groudon definitely beats Kyogre, but I have a hot take that I'm about to deliver right here in the form of Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. These designs right here are one of the very rare times that Game Freak gets their design better on the second go around. Most of the time, when Game Freak decides they're gonna add on a new form to an already established Pokemon, it usually doesn't work. Usually it's a lot worse than what we originally had, but I will say this is a rare time where the second form of a Pokemon we already got is way better. I would honestly say Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon both go up into Z tier as far as like insanely well done designs. Primal Groudon kind of looks like the fake Groudon that's from that movie, if you've seen that. It kind of looks like that. It's got like the scales and everything and like the glow on the pattern and everything. I've always thought that whenever I looked at Primal Groudon, but like that's not a bad thing. That's a compliment to it. Rayquaza or Rayquaza, depending on who you ask. I say Rayquaza, but I said Rayquaza just so I didn't piss anybody off. But now I'm opening the debate, so we're all gonna talk about it in the comments. Tell me which way you say it. Without a doubt, in my mind, I know I said Lugia is my favorite Pokemon, but that does not mean that it is the best designed. It just means that it's my favorite personally. Rayquaza is quite literally the best designed legendary Pokemon that Game Freak has ever come out with. It is intimidating and it looks insanely good while still feeling like a Pokemon and still feeling like it fits in. And there's not another Pokemon on this list that I think comes close to it as far as cohesive design with the original intention that you see from the beginning. I think Rayquaza easily is, without a doubt in my mind, I'll say it again, the best designed legendary on this list. I would put it up into the highest Z tier that I can give, without a doubt. Mega Rayquaza. This is a sick design as well, but we start getting a little over the top with the Mega evolutions here. I feel like Mega Rayquaza kind of looks more like a Yu-Gi-Oh card rather than a Pokemon. It's still a fantastic design, don't get me wrong, but I would put Mega Rayquaza into S tier, not quite up there in Z. It always kind of irked me as well that Mega Rayquaza is a Mega evolution and not a Primal evolution like Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. It just didn't really make sense to me. Jirachi. This Pokemon's great. It's got a cute legendary design similar to Mew and Celebi, but we don't really ever get to see it in the games, and you don't really ever get to see Celebi either, or Mew really either, but I feel like Mew and Celebi both have that like mystique around them in the games. They also have the lore that's built around them in the actual game, and you see little pieces and things that you can learn about them as time goes on with the games. Whereas Jirachi, I don't think has as much build-up. It still does have that simple design that I've always praised with Pokemon, but I don't think I could put Jirachi any higher than A tier. Deoxys. This is one of the most sauce designs from all of Gen 3, and honestly, I think on this list as well. I think Deoxys is a really interesting Pokemon. It's called the DNA Pokemon, and I think it was one of the first Pokemon that had separate forms it could transform into. You have attack, defense, and speed. I would put Deoxys in its base form up into S. I would put Deoxys in attack into Z tier. That is a fantastic design. and I will never get tired of looking at that. It's a sick and unique design without feeling like it's going away from the core principles that make a Pokemon look like a Pokemon. Deoxys in defense form, though, it's kind of okay. I'd probably put into B tier. I just don't really love the round design. I had a toy of defense mode Deoxys when I was growing up, and the main thing I would always think about is how much I wished I had the toy of the attack version because it looked so much cooler. Deoxys in speed form, I still think looks pretty cool, but I don't think I'd put it any higher than A tier. And then we have Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. This trio is cool because they're plot relevant and they all represent one of the lakes in the Sinnoh region, but I just never really liked them even when I played Gen 4. And Gen 4 is my favorite region of all time, but I don't really love this trio. The designs are simple, and yeah, they scream out Pokemon to me, but they don't really resonate that legendary energy to me. I don't know what it is. I've always kind of felt that way. I would probably put Uxie into C tier, I'd put Mesprit up into A, and I'd probably put Azelf up into A as well, just a little bit higher than Mesprit. Dialga. Now we start getting into the era of Pokemon where things just started scaling like crazy, and this is the exact reason why I love the Sinnoh region so much. It's why it's my favorite one of all time, is because you have the literal creator of time and space and the actual creator of the entire like Pokemon universe within Sinnoh, and it makes sense. And once you introduce these things, it's like, where do you go from here? And this is why I will always say Pokemon absolutely peaked with Gen 4. You quite literally cannot go beyond the creator of the universe when it comes to Pokemon. And there's other things you can do with Pokemon, as we've seen with other generations, but I just feel like, you know, once you jump the shark, you've done your coolest trick, it's kind of like all downhill from there, no? When you have the creator of time and space, and they're as sauced as they are, and you have the expansive world that is Sinnoh, and all of the other things that you have, it is kind of hard to go beyond that. As far as where I would rank Dialga, I think by design, I would probably put Dialga up into S, and I would actually put Palkia up into S as well, but I actually do think that Palkia has a better design than Dialga, and this is coming from somebody who played Pokemon Diamond first, and I still do think Palkia is a better design than Dialga. Dialga origin form. Ugly. I really don't know why they decided to go back and give them origin forms. I get it, you know, Giratina has an origin form. It's to convey, you know, what they looked like when the universe was being created and all of that, right? Like, I understand why they decided to do it, but I just don't love their designs on either of them. I think Dialga origin form, for me, actually goes down into C tier. It's really ugly. Palkia origin form, I'd probably put up into like A tier. I still like that form a little bit, but it's like, where are your arms? You know what I mean? I don't know. It doesn't really work if I'm being real with you. And it goes back to that idea of Game Freak getting their designs wrong when they try to tack on things afterward, right? They got away with it with Giratina and Shaman, but that was because they added it like a couple years after they did the original release of Diamond and Pearl, and they came out with Platinum, and it was like, oh, okay, so this is like the finished product of what you were intending, rather than it being like, oh, we need to like tack on another form from like 15 years ago, like they do with like the Primal Groudon and, you know, Mega Rayquaza and, you know, the Galarian forms and the Mewtwo forms and like all of these other things. It felt more natural to do it with Giratina and Shaman, but I don't think it worked with Dialga and Palkia at all. Heatran. Heatran to me feels more like a Final Evolution fire starter rather than feeling like a genuine legendary Pokemon. And I honestly forgot Heatran existed up until we started doing this list. And now we're here and I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's on the list, sure. I would put Heatran, as far as the legendaries go and comparative to this entire list, I would put Heatran into F. Regigigas. I love Regigigas. I love its design. I love its, you know, it has to have all the other Regis around it for you to get it. I remember being a kid and running into the statue of Regigigas and being like, ooh, I got a legendary Pokemon, I'm gonna get to catch this. But then you don't, because you don't have the other Regis from like Pokemon Emerald or Ruby or whatever. It like kind of broke my heart, but it also made me like yearn to get them. You know what I mean? It kind of incentivized you to go on the journey that was the challenge of getting the Regis from the prior games and then come back and get this. It felt like there was a reward to going through that hardship in the Gen 3 games to get it. And I feel like Regigigas, as far as design goes, is really good. I love this design. I think it's really, really sick. I would put Regigigas up into high S tier. I think it's a really, really cool design, and I'm glad that the Sinnoh region decided to include him. Cresselia. Cresselia kind of serves as like the foil to Darkrai in the Sinnoh region, which I can appreciate, but I never really liked Cresselia, and I always kind of felt like it was just like, I don't know, another like fluff Pokemon. It didn't really feel like anything special to me. I would put Cresselia into C tier, probably. Darkrai. I love Darkrai. I don't know if it was ever actually possible to get Darkrai naturally in the game. It might have been through an event or whatever, but I remember late into my childhood, my brother bought an action replay, which allowed us to like walk through the walls and eventually get to where Darkrai was. And I just remember that being like a really cathartic moment for me. And it really is solidified in my memories because it was like, whoa, like, you're not supposed to be able to get this Pokemon. And it felt like something really, really special. But on top of that, the entire plot that was meant to happen was that like this Pokemon was haunting someone's dreams and you're supposed to go after them, and like I think you go to sleep and then you wake up on the island that Darkrai's on and it's like eating dreams. It's really crazy and really wild for a Pokemon game, and Gen 4 really did go crazy with that kind of thing. It really went in deep when it came to like the darker tones that you could get with Pokemon. Like the entire like thing where Team Galactic blows up a lake and then you go there and there's like Magikarp flopping around. They got crazy in Gen 4. As far as design goes though, I would put Darkrai up into S tier for sure. It's a sick design. Manaphy. The only way you could access Manaphy in the games was by playing, I think it was Pokemon Ranger, and then you could get a Manaphy egg and then you could give it to your actual like mainline Pokemon game, and you could hatch one, and then eventually you'd get a Manaphy, and that'd be it. That'd be the only way you could get it. And that was cool, but Manaphy itself as a Pokemon is really nothing crazy. I would probably put Manaphy into like very low A tier. Kind of on the same level as like Azelf and Mesprit, basically. Fione, on the other hand, felt nowhere close to as special as Manaphy because you could just hatch a Manaphy egg and get a Fione, and you could just keep doing that over and over again. It really wasn't like special to get one of these. And honestly, I'm surprised this is even considered a legendary. I would put Fione into like B tier. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Shaman Landform and Shaman Skyform. I think these are both solid designs, but to me, Shaman in both of its forms don't really scream out legendary Pokemon to me. To its credit, if you were to tell me that Shaman was a grass type starter, I'd be like, damn, that's a pretty solid design. But I think as far as legendaries go, I'd put it into like mid A tier on both of them. Giratina. I love Giratina, but the original version of Giratina, kinda uggo. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't really love the original version of Giratina, and when I caught it in Pokemon Diamond, I was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is just another legendary that you can happen to catch. And then, when I got Platinum, I was like, wait, okay, they made a whole game based around this guy, and the origin form is ultra sauced. The base form of Giratina, I would put into A tier, but the origin form, definitely, without a doubt, goes up into Z tier. Arceus. This is the literal god of all Pokemon. This is what I was trying to say earlier. You have the creator of the universe and everything we know about the Pokemon world, and it's somehow a living, obtainable thing in the universe, and then you want to tell me that Pokemon didn't peak here. Like, Gen 4 expanded on the Pokemon lore more than I think most other regions ever even get close to. And without a doubt in my mind, Arceus goes up into Z tier. I remember being a kid and my brother telling me about this extra Pokemon that you could go and get that wasn't Giratina, that was not Dialga and Palkia, and somehow it was stronger than all of those, and it could be any type you wanted it to be. I was like, there's no way, right? We got an action replay, and we went up to Spear Pillar, we walked up the stairs, and you see this thing just sitting there that you're not supposed to see. You're literally not supposed to see it because it's not put into the game for you to see. It's like you have to hack to get it. And you get up there, you see it, and that theme music starts playing, you know, those drums start coming in, and you're like, wait. Cobalion. This, to me, does not feel like a legendary. It feels like something you could go and catch in the wild. And the same goes for the other two Pokemon in this line as well. I think Cobalion probably goes into C tier as far as design. I think Terrakion goes into F, and Verizon Wireless probably goes up into C tier as well with Cobalion. Gen 5 has a lot of legendary Pokemon that do not feel like legendaries, and that's where this trend really starts to begin. Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. I know I just set up the idea that I was going to start shitting on Gen 5 Pokemon, but I actually do think Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus, those feel like legendary Pokemon, and it's a damn good trio. I would put these three legendaries up into like high A tier. They genuinely do feel like legendary Pokemon. Pokemon, and I can't really knock them too hard. However, their Therian forms, they take that idea of actually feeling like legendaries and just throw it out the window. I would put these into solid C tier. Zekrom. I like Zekrom a lot. I think its design is pretty cool for a Yu-Gi-Oh card. As a Pokemon, I think it's very okay. Don't get me wrong, it still looks cool, but I think as like a cover art Pokemon, I would probably put Zekrom into really high A tier. I like the design, but it doesn't really feel like it fits in with the Pokemon we have in S and Z as far as their designs go. Now, Reshiram actually does feel like a Pokemon, and I do like Reshiram's design, I think, a little bit more than I like Zekrom's. I would put Reshiram into S. Kyurem. I'm surprised they never made a Pokemon Gray with this Pokemon being like the main focus. They ended up coming out with Black 2 and White 2, which does feature him on the cover art, but I always thought it was kind of funny that they made Platinum, but they never made a Pokemon Gray. I guess they just wanted to milk the franchise twice for the same game. But I would put Kyurem probably up there in A tier with original Zekrom, but Black Kyurem, if they came out the gate with Black and White and they had these two designs on the cover arts, I think it would have been fantastic, because both designs for Black and White Kyurem both genuinely feel like Pokemon designs. I would put Black Kyurem up into high S tier, and I would put White Kyurem over next to Reshiram in like lower S tier for sure. Victini. I don't love Victini as a legendary Pokemon. It doesn't really give off legendary or mythical Pokemon vibes, and to me, whenever I saw Victini in like promotional stuff, I always got the vibe that they were trying to make their new Pikachu. Even though they've tried doing that a billion times in prior generations, it just felt like they were trying to do it again and to like really hype up this Pokemon that really had no sauce behind it. I don't love Victini as a legendary. I would probably put it into like B tier. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. That being said, that's where I put it. Keldeo and Keldeo Resolute. These genuinely are not legendaries. You're not going to try to convince me these are legendaries. I would put these into F. Meloetta. I like this one because it has a unique vibe to it, and I can buy that this would be a legendary. I'd put this one into A. And its pirouette form, I don't love it as much. It kind of loses a little bit of the sauce that you have in the original design. I'd put this one into B tier. Genesect. To me, Genesect doesn't feel like a legendary either. You want to know what I do think it feels like? If you took the cannon off of Genesect's back and you told me that Genesect was the final evolution in the Scyther line, I would believe you. It doesn't really feel like a legendary Pokemon in itself. I don't know, with Genesect, I'm always kind of conflicted. Like, sometimes I think the design is cool with the cannon on the back, and then other times I kind of think it's tacky. I would probably put it into like low A tier. Yveltal. Yveltal is a sauce design. It is a fantastic design to represent Pokemon Y. Xerneas, on the other hand, does not feel like a proper counterpart to the Y that you get with Yveltal. It doesn't feel like an X Pokemon. Yveltal, for me, is probably one of the best cover art Pokemon that exists out there of all time. I would put it into Z tier for sure. Xerneas, on the other hand, while still feeling like a legendary Pokemon, but I feel like given the amount of like deer-esque Pokemon that we've seen that kind of look exactly like Xerneas, it doesn't really stand out. It kind of feels like a Stantler clone to me, and it shouldn't feel that way if it's a legendary Pokemon. I still do like Xerneas a lot. I would put it up into S, but I do have my gripes with it. Zygarde 10%. I think this design's very okay. It kind of looks like Houndoom if it were like green, but it's nothing to write home about. I'd probably put it into B tier. Zygarde 50%. I'd put this one also into like lower B tier as well. I think the regular Zygarde at 10% goes a little higher than that, but I think 50% is pretty low B tier, kind of almost going into C, but because it's like a midway for a legendary, it's like its midway form, I can't be too mad at it. Zygarde Complete. Now on this tier list, I've called some Pokemon Digimon-esque, and I'm definitely going to keep doing that as we get further into the next generations, but I think Zygarde Complete definitely is the worst offender on this list of looking like a Digimon. This is Kirpymon from the Digimon movie, and the face that this thing has on it kind of makes me think of the face that's on the Zygarde chest, if that's what what that is, but I don't know. It, to me, feels like not a Pokemon. But Zygarde Complete, I think I'd probably put into like, I don't know, mid A tier. I'm hoping that we get more with Zygarde. We get more of an expansion on Zygarde with Z through A, but who knows? Hoopa, that does not feel like a legendary to me at all. I would put Hoopa up into like F tier. Hoopa Unbound. See, we go from 0 to 100 like insanely fast here. Like that does not look anything close to the thing that we had right before it. I would put Hoopa Unbound. It does feel like a legendary, but I'd put it into like probably B tier. It's very okay. I don't love its design too much. Diancie. I like Diancie. I think it feels like a legendary Pokemon. It feels like something mythical. I would put it into like A tier. I think I'd say the same for Mega Diancie. It also feels the same way. Volcanion. That's a Digimon. That goes into like B tier. Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, Tapu Fini. These kind of feel like, to me, if you were to make the Burmy line from the Sinnoh region into legendary Pokemon. They don't feel like legendaries. Yeah, they're cohesive and they all go together, but I don't really feel like they're legendary Pokemon. I would put all of them into probably C tier. They're very forgettable. Cosmog. This feels like a legendary. It's got that sparkle to it. It feels like something you don't typically see, and it's still cute. It's got that, like, you know, cute design. I would actually put Cosmog up into S. I like that design a lot. It actually does feel like something special. Cosmoem, I don't think is as cool, but I do think it deserves to go up into like lower A tier. Solgaleo. Solgaleo does not really feel like the representation for the sun like Lunala does. When you look at Lunala, you're like, whoa, that's like something special. You look at Solgaleo and you're like, oh, is that like this generation's Final Evolution Firestarter? That's what that feels like. And I have to say, Solgaleo is a cool design, but it doesn't scream cover art-esque Pokemon to me. Like, if I were a kid and I were buying one of these, I would buy the Lunala one because the Lunala one just looks cooler. And I don't think Solgaleo comes anywhere close, but I would still put Solgaleo into like mid-A tier. Lunala, on the other hand, I think deserves to go up into like very high S tier. That's a pretty damn good look. Magearna. This kind of feels like Diancie, but like not as cool. It's like a mechanical type thing, and that's fine, but I'm kind of indifferent to this one as well. I put this into B tier as well as its OG colors. Zeraora. How do you say that? -5 rating. Zeraora. Lil bro, you are not Lucario. That's a C tier. Zeraora also does feel a lot like a Digimon as well. Type Null. This thing is weird, but I kind of like it because it's like weird in a good way, and it's supposed to be like a creature that was created in a lab or something. I could be wrong. Please, if I'm not mistaken, it evolves into Silvally, which then can access any type kind of similar to Arceus without being Arceus, which I kind of like, and that does make it a good legendary. I do like that idea. As far as Type Null goes, I think design-wise and everything, I think by design, I would put it into like B tier, but because it's kind of an interesting Pokemon in itself, I would put it into A. Silvally, on the other hand, by its ability to change and turn into any type that it wants, I would actually put it up into S as well. I think that is a really cool idea and cool concept. Meltan. I'm very neutral on this one. I don't really love it and I don't hate it. Melmetal, I think, is kind of cool as well. I kind of feel the same way about Melmetal as well. G-Max Melmetal, I will say across the board, I hate G-Max Pokemon. I don't know what it is about it, but I just think Pokemon getting really big, it's kind of not interesting to me, and it really doesn't feel like, I don't know, it feels uninspired just making something really big, you know? I don't know, that's how I've always kind of felt about it. I would put it into like, you know what, I'll keep it in B with the other forms. Marshadow, I think this design is cute. I like the little like swirls on its head. I'd put this one into low A tier. Necrozma, this is where you start really losing me on this list. I feel like up to this point, I've been able to kind of excuse everything that I've seen and be like, yeah, I'm cool with this or cool with that, and you know, some of the designs are here or there or whatever, but I feel like Necrozma, though it looks cool, it doesn't feel like Pokemon. And a lot of the things on this list do genuinely feel like Pokemon, but what is this? You know what I mean? Like, I don't really love this design that much, if I'm being real with you. I don't know if there's like a big Necrozma fan base out there. There's a fan base for literally every Pokemon on this list, and everyone has their favorite Pokemon, and somehow, some way, I'm stubbing a billion toes, but I gotta be real, but it kind of is in the same realm as Zekrom for me, where I would put it up into A tier, but it doesn't feel like Pokemon to me. I think I can confidently say that for all of its other forms too, but I think the other forms are a little bit lower for me because they start going really crazy. They're still in A tier, but not quite as high. Zacian, the Sword and Shield Pokemon. Oh, dude, these, it's so bad. Like, I don't want to be super critical, but like, these really are not great, man. Like, I've got to be really real with you. I've got to give you my real opinion. I don't love these that much. And I think, you know, I make the Digimon comparison, you know, a lot, but this is actually one of the first Pokemon that I ever thought that about, and it was because Zacian looks just like Garurumon from Digimon. Like, I couldn't get that out of my head when I first saw that, and that was where I started making these comparisons with Pokemon and Digimon. Like, a lot of them share similarities, and yeah, they're obviously, like, both pocket monster IPs, but, like, Pokemon didn't always feel like Digimon. They had their own separate, you know, avenues, and slowly but surely Pokemon started taking a little inspiration from Digimon along the lines, and I feel like Zacian is a very clear example of that. Maybe it wasn't done intentionally, but that's always how it's felt in my mind. I would put Zacian, I'd put it into B tier. I would put Hero Zacian B tier as well. Zamazenta, oh, that's so bad looking, man. Like, if this is your favorite Pokemon, I feel bad because I don't want you to be like, oh, this guy hates my favorite Pokemon, but like, I do. You know, like, I'd put it into B tier as well. Hero Zamazenta, I'd put it into B tier as well. Like, just, these really are not great looking Pokemon. Like, they really aren't. Eternatus, like, dude, that's a Yu-Gi-Oh, man! Like, if you were to tell me that Eternatus was in a Yu-Gi-Oh card, if you were to pull this up on me and summon it mid-battle on your dual disc, I'd be like, I'm gonna lose this battle now. That's a Yu-Gi-Oh, man. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's a cool-looking Pokemon. But at the same time, it just genuinely doesn't feel like Pokemon. I gotta put it into, like, A tier because I like the design, but it just does not feel like Pokemon. And then somehow the big Yu-Gi-Oh gets even bigger with its Gigantamax form. I think that Gigantamax form is really, really ugly. For me, that goes into F. Cubfu. To me, this looks more like what a pseudo-legendary would look like. It doesn't really scream legendary or mythical to me, but I guess it is. I would put this into C tier. I gotta be real, as I'm looking at this list, I have stuff like Mega Mewtwo X in C tier in the same realm as like Cubfu, and I might need to like move some of these around as time goes on, but I'll look at this at the end and tell you what I'll change. Single and Rapid Strike Urshifu. These both are kind of cool designs, but like, again, they kind of feel more like Ursaring to me rather than like actual genuine legendaries. I don't know what it is about these later gens that have that issue. It just doesn't feel like they have that aura to them. I would probably put these two into B tier. I don't hate them, but I don't love them. Their Gigantamax forms are actually kind of cool. I would put these two into like lower A. Regieleki. I don't mind other Regis existing, but it kind of felt like in Gen 4, they topped off the idea of all the Regis by having Regigigas exist, and it was like the big Regi of all of the Regis. So having Regieleki and Regidrago get introduced later on, it kind of feels like a cop-out, and if they were going to do that, they should have introduced at least one more, so there could have been 7 Regis to represent all 7 dots on the actual Regi design that all of them share. But as of right now, there's only 6 Regis. If you made it to where there were 7, I'd be like, okay, this looks like something planned from the beginning, but they didn't even do that. Regieleki, I don't hate, but I think I'd put it up there with Regirock as far as, you know, being kind of mid-tier, not really anything crazy, not anything, you know, amazing. Regidrago has a pretty solid design. I like the open dragon head mouth thing that it's got going on. I would put this one into like higher A tier. It's a pretty solid design. Specterior and Glasterior. Both of these do not scream legendary to me. In my Discord, we have a Pokemon bot, and I remember Specterior came up and nobody wanted to catch it. And we have a lot of people in my Discord that like to play with the Pokemon bot, and literally nobody grabbed this. And then one person finally did, and they were like, you guys know this is a legendary, right? Nobody knew it was a legendary because nobody cared about it. I've got to be so real. I think both of these deserve low C tier. Calyrex. I don't... What am I even looking at? That's a C tier. Calyrex Ice Rider and Calyrex Shadow Rider. I think if these were the designs to begin with and it wasn't trying to do some cheeky thing where it's, you know, build your own Pokemon, and these two designs were like the actual first designs and these were the only ones that existed, I think I could give it a little bit more of a pass, because I think I would put these into like lower B tier, but I don't think the pieces that make up those two Pokemon are anything that interesting. Enamorus. This is going back to the Gen 5 trio that I was praising so much before, and this is kind of what I've been talking about. I hate when Game Freak just decides, oh, we're gonna throw this on there. You know, we're gonna tack this into your thing. They did it with the 2 new Regis, they do it with the new forms for the legendaries, and it just is, it's such a tired idea. Just like make new things that are interesting. Like, I genuinely do think Game Freak does have it in them. There are some interesting concepts in these later Pokemon games, but it also feels like they're like, oh, we have to add something from, you know, before. On top of that, I don't even think Enamorus holds a candle to the other versions that we see in Gen 5. I would probably put Enamorus into, like, I don't know, B tier as well, and its Therian form, I would put into C tier. I just don't love the Therian forms. Zaruda and Dada Zaruda. I think Zaruda is a pretty cool design. I'd put it up into like A, and I think the Dada Zaruda is pretty decent too. I think I'd also put that into a little bit higher A, but like they're very okay. Wo Chien. That is a Studio Ghibli. What? I don't even know what I'm looking at, dude. Scarlet and Violet lost the plot. All right, I'm just gonna say it, man. Like I don't know what happened in these games. I think Koraidon and Miraidon are cool legendaries. I actually would go as far as to say, since I'm just jumping ahead and getting rid of these now, I think Koraidon deserves to go up into S, and I think Miraidon also deserves to go up into S. These actually feel like some cool Pokemon designs, and their use in the actual game is pretty cool too. But everything that's left on this list, dare I say, I've never done this when doing a ranking. Everything on this tier list that is left sucks. And if you put a gun to my head and you ask me to rank these, the only one that I think goes higher than F is Fez and Dippity. And I would put Fez and Dippity up into mid A tier, because that design is cool. But the rest of these, I don't really like them. I think Terrapagos, you know, the Terrapagos, whatever terrestrial means, I think that one goes up there as well into A tier. But I think I could confidently tell you that as far as legendary designs go, the rest of these go into F tier. I think Pecharunt or Pekarunt, whichever way you say it, I think is kind of a decent design, but I don't think it would go any higher than B tier. But before I lock in all of these legendaries as my real word and real opinion, let me look over these real quick and tell you if I would change anything, because there are so many legendaries on this list that I need to actually go and verify before I say that I've locked this in. Upon further analysis, I have decided to make a couple of changes. Giratina in its base form would go up into S. Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus deserve to go up into S as well. Shadow Mewtwo deserves to go up into high S. Mega Mewtwo X deserves to go up into A. And Mega X Shadow Mewtwo also deserves to go up into A, but low A. And with that, that is every Pokemon legendary ranked from Z tier all the way down to F tier. There are a lot of legendary Pokemon in the franchise, and we just got through the entire list. Let me know what you would change about my list. Let me know how you would rank these. Be sure to comment what your favorite legendary Pokemon is, and if you want to further join the discussion, be sure to join our Discord, because we are always talking about these tier list videos in there. We're talking about everything that goes on the internet. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and sub, and I will see you in the next video.